will talk about biochemistry. So what is biochemistry? Biochemistry, sometimes called biological chemistry, it is the study of chemical processes within and relating to living organisms. Biochemistry, it deals with the structures, functions, and interactions of biological molecules such as proteins, nucleic acids, carbohydrates, and lipids, which provide the structures of cells and perform many of the functions associated with life. Now, we will move on to the occurrence and functions of carbohydrates. So, here's the carbohydrates have the following functions in the human body. First, we have to provide energy through oxidation. So guys, sumiri nga nikita nga oxidation, process niya at hiya as a result of oxiding of being oxidized. Provide stored energy. Third, supply materials for the synthesis of other biochemical substance. Form a part of structural framework for DNA and RNA molecules. When linked to lipids, they form structural components of cell membranes. Last, when linked to proteins, they participate in cell and cell molecules recognitions and processes. So those that I discuss is the carbohydrates is the parts of carbohydrates of the following functions in human body. So kontiya ka ng occurrence and functions of carbohydrates. So let's move on the classifications of carbohydrates. In classifications of carbohydrates, we have 4 types in carbohydrates. Before we know these 4 types. Let's know what is carbohydrates. So carbohydrates, it is called carbs. It is defined as aldehydic or ketonic compounds with some number of oxygen groups. So monosaccharides are simply sugars are formed by only one fully hydroxyaldehydic or ketonic unit. So meaning, it monosaccharide guys kanan simply sugars ito ya. So, it oligosaccharides. When we say guys oligosaccharides are formed by short chains of monosaccharidic units linked one to the next by chemical bonds called glycosidic bonds. So guys, it most abundant oligosaccharides are disaccharides formed by 2 monosaccharides, and especially in the human diet, the most important are sucrose. So, sucrose may common table sugar, lactose, and maltose. And polysaccharides are polymers consisting of 20 to 10 monosaccharadic units. They differ each other for the monosaccharadic recurring in the structure, for the length and the degree of branching of chains, or for the type of links between units. So, amin at mga examples kanan monosaccharides, disaccharides, and polysaccharides. Monosaccharides may glucose, fructose, and galactose. Glucose may fruit, and fructose niya kanan honey, and galactose digested milk. Disaccharides liwat and iya examples and sucrose and table sugar and lactose and milk and galactose and barley. Polysaccharides and iya examples among starch and kanan starch and potatoes and kanan cellulose fruit and veg or vegetables and pectin and whole grain cereals and glycogen stored animal starch or starch. Chirality. Chirality is a geometric property of some molecules and ions. A chiral molecule is not superposable on its mirror image. The presence of an asymmetric carbon center is one several structural features that induce chirality in organic and inorganic molecules. The term chirality is derived from the ancient Greek word of hand. The mirror image of a chiral molecules or ions are called enantiomers or optical isomers. It is the individual enantiomers are often designated as either right-handed or left-handed. The stereoisomers in enantiomers and diastomers. In enantiomers, it contains chiral centers that are non-superimposable and mirror images. They only come in pairs. In diasteromers, it contains chiral centers are non-superimposable but are not mirror images. There can be many more than a depending on the number of stereocenter. In order to have stereoisomers, the molecule must be chiral. Remember, in order to have a chirality, molecules must have the following characteristics. The carbon center for unique substituents, meaning they are chemically distinguishable from each other. In this example, the molecule on the left has 3 red hydrogens. These hydrogens are chemically distinguishable from each other, so the molecules is achiral. 2 molecules on the right has 1 red hydrogen and 3 other unique substituents, therefore the molecule is chiral. Fischer projection formula, a two-dimensional structural notations for showing the spatial arrangement of groups about a chiral center's molecules. In the Fischer projection formula, a chiral center is represented as the intersections of vertical and horizontal line. They orient the stereocenter so that bands projecting away from you are vertical and bands projecting towards you are horizontal line. In Fischer projection, a two-dimensional representation showing the ion figurations of a stereocenter. It is the horizontal lines represent bands projecting forward, vertical lines represent bands projecting to the rear. The only storm in the plane of the paper in the stereocenter. Enantiomers have identical chemical and physical properties in an achiral environment. Enantiomers rotate the directions of plane polarized light to equal but opposite angles and interact with other chiral molecules differently. The enantiomers are stereoisomers that are non-superimposable mirror image. A molecule with 1 chiral carbon atom exists as 2 stereoisomers learned enantiomers. Monosaccharides are also called simple sugar, are the simplest form of sugar or the most basic units of carbohydrates. They cannot be further hydrolyzed the simpler chemical compounds. The example of monosaccharides include glucose, fructose, and galactose. Monosaccharides are the building blocks of disaccharides such as the sucrose and intose, and polysaccharides such as cellulose and starch. Monosaccharides can be classified by the number of carbon atoms they contain: triose, tetrose, pentose, hexose, heptose, and so on. The most important monosaccharides, glucose, is a hexose example. It is example of heptose include the ketosis, mononeptulose, and pseudoheptulose. So let's move on to biochemically important monosaccharides. The hexose, glucose, galactose, and fructose are important in monosaccharides rather. Glucose is the most prevalent monosaccharides in diet. Glucose is a building block of the disaccharides is the sucrose, maltose, lactose, and polysaccharides. The one major functions of monosaccharide is its use for energy within a living organism. Glucose is commonly known carbohydrates that is metabolized within cells to create fuel. So let's move on to cyclic form of monosaccharides. In cyclic form of monosaccharides is the monosaccharides that contain 5 or more carbon atoms form cyclic structures in aqueous solutions. Two cyclic stereoisomers can form from each straight chain, the monosaccharides. These are known as anomers. Howard projections. It is a common way of writing a structural formula to represent the cyclic structures of monosaccharides with a simple three-dimensional perspective. Organic chemistry, and especially that use the Howard projections the most. By the way, the Howard projection was named after the English chemist Sir Norman Haworth. In reactions of monosaccharides, perhaps the most important reactions of monosaccharides is the conversions of hemiacetal to an acetylene, the presence of an alcohol and acid. The products we known as glycosides, and the band between the oxygen of the alcohol and the acetyl carbon is called a glycosidic band. Disaccharides. Disaccharides is the sugar form when a monosaccharides are joined by glycosidic linkage like monosaccharides, disaccharides, and soluble in water. The three common examples are sucrose, lactose, and maltose. Disaccharides are one of the 4 chemical groupings of carbohydrates. This is the monosaccharides, disaccharides, polysaccharides, polygosaccharides. The most common type of disaccharides, sucrose, lactose, and maltose, have 12 carbon atoms with the general formula. The difference in this are due to atomic arrangement within the molecule. Oligosaccharides, from the Greek oligos, a few, and saccharide sugar is a saccharide polymer containing a small number of monosaccharides. Oligosaccharides can have many functions including cell recognition and cell binding. For example, the glycolipids have an important role in the immune response. They are normally present as glycans. Oligosaccharides chains linked to lipids are two compatible amino acid side chains. General characteristic of polysaccharides. They range in structure from linear to highly branched. Example, it includes storage polysaccharides such as starch and glycogen and structural polysaccharides such as cellulose and chitin. Chitin polysaccharides are often quite heterogeneous, containing slight modifications of repeating unit. Depending on the structures, these macromolecules can have distinct properties from their monosaccharides building blocks. Monosaccharides are the same type. The polysaccharides is homoglycan, but when one more than one type of monosaccharide is present, they are called heteropolysaccharides or heteroglycans. Storage of polysaccharides. Any polysaccharides that serve as a form of storage energy in living organisms. Storage polysaccharides include starch, phytoglycogen, and fructose in plants, and glycogen in animals. Starch is a good storage of carbohydrates because it is an intermediate composed to ATP and lipids in terms of energy. In plants, starch storage folds to allow mold space inside cells. It is also insoluble in water, making it so that it can stay inside the plants without dissolving into the system. Structural polysaccharides. There are polysaccharides that take part in forming the structural framework of the cell walls in plants and skeleton of animals. Structural polysaccharides are one of two main types, the chitin and cellulose. Acidic polysaccharides are polysaccharides containing carboxyl groups and or sulfuric ester groups. The acidic group may be free or naturally esterified with methanol. Dietary considerations and carbohydrates. Its presence in food including sugar, starch, cellulose, and gums. Carbohydrates serve as a major energy source of animal diet. Dietary sugars come from various natural and natural sources, including fruits, hens, and honey and corn syrup. Lactose intolerance is the result of being homozygous for the recessive lactose allele that is poorly expressed after early childhood. Being homozygous or heterozygous for the persistence of allele allows lactose expressions after the time when lactose expression is normally down. In sugar substitute is a food addition that provides a sweet task like that of sugar while containing significantly less food energy-based sweeteners, making it a zero-calorie or low-calorie sweetener. Artificial sweetener may be derived through the manufacturing of plant extracts or process of chemical synthesis.